Hello there. We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We're Erin from Ever Learning, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves, and myself, Hayley from Taking a Kinder Path. We're gathering for conversations about family life and home education, particularly unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed learning, or as I like to call it, natural learning. We'll be sharing our experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the virtual kitchen table. My name's Hayley and I'm here with the lovely Erin and Ashley today. How are you guys?
Good. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Hi to both of you too. I'm fine. How are you doing?
Oh yeah, I'm doing good, thank you. And I should say happy anniversary to you both, because it's actually almost exactly a year since we recorded the first virtual kitchen table. So that's exciting.
And
I think what are we on now? Episode, is it 16 or I'm not sure, but
it might be 16, but then we have quite a few that are part 1 and part 2. So in reality, it's kind of like way more than that.
Right? We've done a few. Okay, so this episode today, this episode is about lists, and it came about really. The idea was sparked in me a long time ago. One of my favourite ever Christmas presents was actually a book of lists, and I think it was one of those kind of tallest animals, longest rivers. Best places to visit in the world. And I don't know how old I was when I got this book, but I've always remembered it. And I started making lists then, and I haven't stopped. So I thought, hey, an episode about lists would be really cool, because I thought every home educating family must make lots of lists, because we make loads of lists in our house. And I brought this idea to you two, and discovered, to my surprise, that actually, when I said, oh, let's do an episode about lists, you were kind of like, oh, yeah, lists, that's okay. Yeah, I don't really make many of them. And I was like, what? So we're not sure where this conversation is going to go, but I think it should be quite interesting, because I'm a bit of an external processor, and lists are really how I organise my thoughts. So first I thought I'd share a few lists that we make in our house. So I think I've shared this before. One of the very first projects that we did when we started home educating 14 years ago was we made joy lists, and we repeat those quite regularly. Another thing that we do is we make adventure lists. So this year I made a list of 23 things that I wanted to do in 2023. We also have project lists, and in our house a project isn't just things like making a replica Stonehenge, although that is an actual project that we've done. A project really is something, for us anyway, it's something that takes either more than 1 or 2 steps, or it's something that we repeat quite often. So a strange example maybe, but I love walking. So I kind of think of walking as one of my projects, because it would be too easy for me to just get up and walk out of the door. I do a lot of thinking about, I like to collect new places to walk. I like to think about how many hours or how many miles or what time of day I'm going to walk, and how I'm going to fit my walks in next week, and when can I do walks with different people. So yeah, that's kind of a project. My eldest daughter's just turned 25, and she did 25 things to do before she was 25, and she actually told me this morning that she's now working on 25 things she's learned at the age of 25. So that should be quite interesting. So anyway, enough about my list. I could go on about this for ages, and I'm sure you can tell. Erin, do you think you could share with us what you thought when I suggested the topic of lists?
Yeah. So, Hayley, I think if I'm remembering, it was there were a few different thoughts we were brainstorming a little bit, or I think you had brainstormed a few. And I thought they all looked interesting. And I think I'm trying to remember how I responded or what I was thinking, but essentially I was thinking it would be a really nice practical conversation for people. And it's kind of like, there's a lot of conversation in homeschooling and in unschooling about how do people organize their time? How do people kind of keep track of things? For some people, they do, they need to do various kinds of record keeping. And so I remember thinking, oh, that is just a really nice, that could be a really great practical topic. But I was also thinking, and I think I'm going to set this, it might be one I'm more like listening to or getting ideas from, because I don't know that I'd have much to offer, because I don't think of myself as somebody who makes lists. I don't even make a grocery list. So I'm just not a list person. Now I do, if I have to get things for other people, I will ask them to send me a list, and I'm very diligent about their list. But isn't that funny? I don't know that I've ever really walked into the grocery store with a list. And so when I think about it, in the context of family or in the context of home education, I do know, what I think? I think through lists sometimes. So I have made lists of books, for example, that that I might be interested in reserving from the library, that kind of thing. But it's not really for the purpose of, I don't know where those lists are. It's kind of like I write as I'm looking at something, and it's not necessarily for the purpose of, okay, I'm going to keep this list and then I'll take it here. I don't know. I'm sure I'm sounding really disorganized, and I'm actually not an overly disorganized person, but I guess I just don't organize through lists. So I don't know. I think I'm going to have to keep processing through this conversation. So Ashley, I'm interested to hear what might have come up for you.
Yeah, I think similar to you, Erin, when Haley, you suggested the topic of lists. My brain kind of went to the same idea of organizing information, and the different times in my life that I've created lists and for what purposes. But I also was kind of I don't think I'll have much to contribute. I don't know that I'll have much to say. And it was funny because one of the first things I thought of was how my husband actually he definitely writes more lists than I do. So I really enjoyed in thinking about our conversation today. The lists that I've made in the past or that I currently make now, but also other people in my family, like the different types of lists that my husband's made over the years, which I'll even just come across when I'm cleaning out a drawer. And then lists that my one kid makes. I was thinking about it. I never would have described him as a list maker before, but he is. Likes to make his own lists, also likes and asks me often to look up lists. He'll say Mama, can you look up a list of the strongest animals? Or a lot of TV and movie character type lists, always wanting, and he thinks there's a list for everything. I can just Google it and there will be a list. So then we moved into him creating his own lists. And then my other kiddo, I was really trying to think, and I don't think lists have really been a thing for him. So it was interesting to think about that. And then one thing I wanted to mention that I realized too is I don't do a lot of list making right now. I do some for mostly just organization. I will do a grocery list, but not every time. But I really, more so in the past, but even now, I enjoy the process of making a list. And what I mean is I like the physical act of writing a list. I like the colorful pens. I've got a bright one now. I like the handwriting practice. I will rewrite a list to make it look nicer. Fun new stationery, especially when I was younger, but even now. So sometimes I'll write a list, not so much because I need one, but because I just want to have an excuse to do that handwriting, I think, which I hadn't really put much thought into before. So I'm excited to see what you guys share about lists, and I've thought of a few things to share with you guys today too, but I think it's going to be a fun thing to chat about.
That's so funny, Ashley, because I would love to be that kind of list maker. I would love to have pretty lists, but I don't think my lists are pretty. I think, I think they're much more functional than not. And my children do say quite often that my handwriting is quite difficult to read. So I guess my lists are definitely, for me, it's about jogging my memory, because if I think I do a lot of thinking, and I may have a tendency to overthink. So having a list enables me to empty some of those thoughts. Maybe it's a bit like Dumbledore in the Pensieve, these memories, but I'm doing that with my thoughts. And I'm thinking now, actually, what a great present that book that I got all those years ago would be for your son.
Yes.
And I mean, I know that you can get lots of these list books, and they can be really cool. And of course, some of them can go out of date really quickly as well, can't they? When we were looking recently through some books, but So I'm wondering, if you don't make lists in quite the same way that I do, how do you capture all of the information that's or maybe it's not whirring around your mind like it's whirring. Maybe you just are more organized generally than I am.
I can
be hard.
No, I could just share quickly, because I was thinking about that, because right now is probably the time in my life where I make the least amount of lists. So when I was in school myself, and then also when I was working full time, I absolutely had lists. I think most of them would have been to-do lists. So I could just write down everything I needed to get done, and I wouldn't forget, and I'd refer back to those lists and cross them off. But now to organize myself, and I can relate to what you're saying, Haley, about like writing it down so that you don't have to continue thinking about it or worry that you're going to forget about it. But I do mine now. Like I have something like a weekly calendar, I guess is what it would be, sitting on my counter. So I'm very visual. So I do need that just like right in front of me. If it's kind of like tucked away, I don't look at it enough. And I just kind of jot whatever I need down there for a week, maybe a week ahead if it's, like an appointment or something. And that does turn out to be a list that I have on a regular basis to just, not forget what we have coming up. And I can talk about this more later if it comes up again. The other thing I do, which you guys know, and Erin, you see me share this in one of our other communities, is I will make a list of all the things we have done. Not all the things, actually. And I've probably talked about it on here already, but kind of that reverse planning idea. So I will just jot down in a agenda type book what we did, a few things that we did each day. And again, that turns into a list too. But other than that, it would just be if I'm making lists with my guys. But as far as like my own personal lists, I think right now that's pretty much it, which to me doesn't seem like very much. I definitely did more in the past.
So when you're talking, Ashley, and then just what you kind of said there before, Haley, I'm wondering what the relationship is. Like not that I expect either of you, just kind of, I'm interested, like globally, what is the relationship between how we record information or kind of bring things outside of our brain and overwhelm? Because it sounds like Haley, when you're describing it, and I've heard other people describe this too, it's kind of like it moves it out of you. Like you have all these things swirling maybe, and it's a way of organizing or compartmentalizing maybe, and it moves it kind of out of yourself. And then Ashley, when you said you were talking about being very visual, and that kind of makes me think, I think I get visual overwhelm really easily. So I think I play with this a little bit. I think I tend to be more of an auditory learner, and I'm more of a, so for me, seeing it all in front of me is like, holy smokes, that's a lot of stuff to do. Right? Where it's almost like if I don't put it out there visually, I mean, Haley, I can completely see how moving it out would it organizes it and it would seem less overwhelming. But I think because I get visually overwhelmed, it just seems like too much in front of me. So I guess then back to your question then about like, how do people organize information if they're not making lists? And I'm still thinking about this. I was thinking a little bit about back to the grocery store idea. So if I'm going in the grocery store, I think what I do is I develop a rhythm. So it's not really just random. I definitely have an order that I walk around the store in. However, let's say I was going to be going to a potluck and I had to make a particular thing. I would probably get all those I wouldn't stick to my area of the store. I would get all my stuff. And I might make a list for that. If it's something I haven't made before and I'm going to a potluck, I would at least make a mental list, right? Like I would be thinking it through. So I would probably go gather those ingredients and I'd think, okay, I've got the ingredients for the thing I have to make. Now I'll go back to my regular, my regular rotation. So I think maybe for me, it has to do with what is my responsibility to other people versus to myself. So whether this is good or not, I don't know. But if I have a commitment to somebody else, I'm much more likely to be diligent about getting that on a calendar somewhere. Whereas for myself, I'm like, well, we'll aim for it. But so I wonder too, if there's just some prioritizing there too. And I mean, I think I would like to prioritize my own stuff more, but for whatever reason, that just hasn't been something I've done. I think I still operate with the mindset of like, okay, I'm finished all the sort of expectations for other people. And now I can decide if I want to do something for myself. And I think I'm trying to shift that a little bit, to add those pieces for myself in, as those priorities too. So I don't know, this kind of shifts to a self-care thing in places, I think, but.
Well, you just made me think about, I don't know if you've heard of Gretchen Rubin. She's got a one of these personality quizzes, and I think it's called the 4 tendencies, and it's to do with your motivation and what motivates you. Is it are you motivated by goals that you set yourself, or are you more motivated by having an external kind of source of accountability, which is so interesting, because when we're thinking about how we want to support our children with their motivation, then whether or not which kind of personality you are is probably going to have quite an influence then on whether or not lists are going to be a useful tool in your household, aren't they? And it's interesting because one of my daughters makes a lot of lists, but she actually said something very similar to you the other day about how if I saw all we were talking about household tasks actually, and or not household tasks, household maintenance, I guess, kind of things that needed to be done in our house. There are a lot of things that need to be done in our house, in terms of fixing things and decorating, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I was suggesting, typical of me, that we should walk around the house with a clipboard and write a list of all the things that needed doing. I thought that would be kind of fun, and I think most of the rest of my family were horrified that would be totally overwhelming. And I think that it's really interesting what you said about if you saw it written down, because I think there is this idea, isn't there, that some people would say that your brain is for having ideas, not for storing ideas. But any of us, if we're overwhelmed, we're not very good at having ideas, are we? So if the act of writing a list makes you overwhelmed, then I guess that's going to stifle your creativity, isn't it? Whereas for me, my creativity, I feel like, is stifled from having all those ideas in my head, because I can't think about anything new, because I'm regurgitating all the things that I'm already thinking about, I guess. And that's why the act for me of writing it down is liberates me from that, I guess. Whereas for you, Erin, I'm getting the sense that that's not the case.
Yeah, I think, and I think, yeah, I think that's it. And yet I'm thinking about the fact that, when we're doing something that's, I guess I'll use the word official. So like yesterday, my daughter went for her driving test, for example, and those kinds of things, I wouldn't call it a list exactly, but I do kind of, and I would say I do it verbally, but I'll kind of go over that. And I think what I do maybe instead of, so whereas my husband would write a list of like, what documents does she need to, is the windshield, or sorry, is the glove compartment well cleaned out, to find, like, just kind of getting things organized. What I tend to do maybe is make my list, like physically. So for example, then when I got up in the morning, there was, like the stuff that we needed to go, whether that was water bottles, whether that was, the ownership or the proof of insurance or whatever, I'll tend to kind of put those in like a pile on the bookshelf. And so in a way, I feel like maybe that operates as a list. This is the stack of things that we need, right, before we go. But I'm also curious about how personality plays. So it was an interesting experience because my husband was able to go yesterday too, and my daughter had wanted him to go. And he's very much a list maker, and he's very organized, and he's he's a very efficient personality. And my daughter is as well. They are list makers. They check off boxes. They're very different than I am that way. But I also realized that if we needed to pivot with something yesterday, it wasn't as bothersome to me as it was to my husband. So I think there were so many things that came up that I wouldn't have even, I'm like, well, we'll just do this then. And he's like, well, so I think that so much of the way we do things is also driven by, what's our tolerance level for error. And I would say even for myself, there are certain activities I have a really high tolerance level for error. If we make a mistake, it's not a big deal. There are some things in life, though, that I do really want to make sure that I kind of get as right as possible. And that's, I think, when I start stacking, I make my stacking list. Maybe that's how I have to start thinking about this stuff, right? It's like a list with all the physical things.
The problem for me, Erin, is I might not see that stack. It might be right in front of me, but I might not see it. Whereas maybe I've trained myself to look at my list. But in terms of being, I'm not a very visual person. There are other members of my family who are brilliant photographers, and I disappoint them dreadfully when I take a photograph of them and there's a tree sticking out of their head or something, because I'm seeing the person that I love, but I'm not seeing the background that is all around them. So I don't think I am very visual like that. So I could easily miss my stack, and that's interesting.
Yeah. I will say I do the same thing, Erin, and I hadn't thought about it. And it almost, as you were explaining that, like making a physical list, to me, I was like, oh, it's skipping the written list and going right to just getting the stuff that you need. And I definitely do that now, especially gathering. Like, I'm thinking if we're going out for a walk or to a park or something, like I start putting all the stuff by the backpack, but I don't necessarily always pack it, because I want to be able to check it all. I want to visually look and see that we have it all before we put it in. And I'll do that even when I have a list. I've been known to, I don't know what this says about me, but I've definitely been known to have a list, even at the grocery store, and I'll have something on the list and I will come back from the store and I didn't get it. So I will make lists and not maybe do the best job using them, because it's not just the grocery store either. And my husband is not like that. And he also doesn't do like what you're describing as the physical list. Like, he very much writes the list and is very good at using the list. Whereas, yeah, I can see his list and be like, whoa, that's a long to-do list. I don't want to look at all of that. I want to look at just like the top three. So I think it's very much to do with yeah, the different personalities and how that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think
Sorry, go ahead, Haley.
no, I was just thinking about that because you're kind of touching again on that overwhelm. And when you were talking, Erin, I was thinking about where you were mentioning the word flexibility came to my mind. You were talking about how yeah, you had more. I think you said more of a margin of error, didn't you, in terms of going about your day. And maybe not that I'm suggesting that your husband is not flexible in terms of his thinking, but I'm thinking about my.
He's really not, Haley, and he's fine for me to say that.
Well, I'm thinking about myself, and I would say I can totally empathize with him. I think I get him very much because I feel yeah, my capacity to be flexible if events change or if somebody springs something on me. I struggle with transitions. I think I may have mentioned this in a video before. And I remember reading about small children when I had small children, and about how, you know, often small children struggle with transitions, and part of our role is to facilitate that for them and give them more warning and yeah, support them through those transitions. And when I was thinking about supporting my children, I realized that actually it wasn't necessarily always them that struggled with the transitions, it was me. And my family, I'm sure, will say to you that if somebody comes along and says, oh, I've had this great idea, shall we do this Saturday night? My default is probably no, I don't think so. But I know, and they know now that my first answer is not necessarily my real answer, I guess. You know, if you give me a bit more time, then I may well be very on board with this. And I remember reading an article that you did, Erin, about external and internal processors. And I feel like this links really nicely to that as well, because I'm an external processor. And I think you were saying, you know, if you have a child who is more of an internal processor and they come to you and say that they want to start, I don't know, a business, I don't know, a card making business or something, and they're an internal processor, then you may well think they've done a lot of the thinking about that, and they may be further ahead in terms of their process of starting that business. Whereas if somebody who's an external processor says that to you, they may actually not end up not doing that. It was just kind of an idea that they need to talk out with you to decide whether they want to do it or not. So the decision is at a different stage depending on whether you're processing it internally or externally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And then when it also is interesting, verbal processing versus written processing, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, okay, then, yeah, as an external processor, you might be more likely to organize your thoughts in writing or make a list. An internal wouldn't be, which I think can be true. And it's funny, I'm thinking of a couple of my kids, like, so one that I would have said was an external processor. I actually asked him last night before this conversation, I'm like, do you make lists? Like, I just thought I would sort of get his, and he said, I don't think so. Why? And I don't think he does written lists, but I think it's because he's verbally processing. And my daughter, who I have always considered to be an internal processor, although I think that's changing a little bit. It's funny how we can, I mean, we do change, right? And our kids change. She has so much written record of everything, right? So it's to-do lists, it's reverse planning, kind of as you mentioned, Ashley, and it's not just to-do lists, like on a practical level, like she'll map out kind of how she wants to build certain skills and when she's aiming for and what she imagines that will look like. So maybe internal processing, even if it's, maybe people aren't necessarily internal processors just because they're not talking about it. Maybe they're just putting it outside of themselves in a different way. But yeah, that whole idea is interesting, isn't it? About kind of how we each come to make those decisions. And
I think
yeah.
I mean, we're all complex beings, aren't we? And some of the, like the personality quiz that I was talking about before, I think that those things that can be really fun to get us to understand ourselves a little bit more. But it doesn't mean that we're going to fall wholly into one box and not another, are we? I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, we're complex and we're ever changing, and things will depend on our, I suppose, on our mood and the sort of resources that we've got available to us, won't they?
Yeah.
But one of the things I think as well, for me, living in an unschooling way with my children, for me, I think lists have helped me to be able to be more flexible and to, I think, because if I've got an idea in my head, let's see if I can explain this well enough. If I've got an idea in my head, I'm a bit fixated by it until I've got it out of my head and put it on a list. So in terms of our lists are not necessarily to-do lists. So the idea that, I was talking, I think, before about adventure lists and joy lists. They're not necessarily things that we have to do. There are ideas, I guess, for things that we could do. And I guess if I'm holding that bit of information in my head, maybe of a certain project that I think, oh yeah, this would be a good idea for my children to do. Once I've got it out onto paper, and I feel, I suppose, that it's recorded then as well for us to come back to later, then maybe I won't feel the tugging inside to make them do it, if that makes sense. I can't. It enables me to be to feel like these things are much more invitations, which is what I want them to be. I want them to be invitations rather than me, because I want to be to be facilitating their own decision making. But at the same time, being able to give them lots of ideas for, I think one of the discussions that we had, Erin, you said you used the word menu, that you liked the idea of lists as being a menu, and I think in terms of strewing, that works really well, doesn't it? It's so the lists are an opportunity for me to present a menu, I guess, of things. They're invitations, they're things that possibilities, rather than things that we have to do.
Yeah, that makes me think about something that I didn't first think about as a list, but as you're talking, Haley, it is a list that I did with my youngest. I don't know if it was the end of August or beginning of September, but kind of as one season was ending and we were getting ready for another season. And we did the whole sitting down. I think because what I'm getting at is like when you're part of a family and when you're a parent, everybody has their ideas and dreams and wants and needs and hopes and wishes. So what we did in this situation, because he kept coming to me saying, I want to do this, and when can we do this, and oh, I have this idea, and I have my own thoughts and ideas, and then I have my other kids' thoughts and ideas, and then we have our family's thoughts and ideas. So I said, do you want to sit down? And I didn't say make a list, but or maybe I did, I don't remember, but we kind of did it on like a big piece of paper. What's everything that you want to do in September? I think we did September, or did we do, I think we did it monthly. Maybe we even did it for fall and winter. I have to go back and take a look, but he loved it because we sat down and I wrote it on the piece of paper and everything. I said, just tell me all your ideas, all your wants, all your desires and wishes for this month or this season. And I think the act of him seeing me write it out for him, for me, I was like, okay, I won't forget, because now we have this record and I can go back to it when we're, making plans and stuff. And I can offer it. But I think he felt really, I don't know, like I was taking his ideas and his wants seriously because mom's writing it down. So, and I think that is something I've maybe not so much intentionally, like the message I've given the kids, but we do write a lot of things down. Like if I can't keep up with all the questions, I'm like, let's write it down and we'll come back to it. So if you write something down, it must be, important, right? So we made a list of all of the things that he could think of at that time, and it was understood that we might not do all those things. There were some big wishes on there, but I think that was part of the fun too, to just enjoy dreaming. And that made me think back to how my husband's done it and we've done it together. Like, well, we've made lists, not so much these days, but we made lists in the past about like all the places we want to visit. Like what are the top 10 places we hope to go to together or with, with the kids or whatever. Um, yeah, now I'm going to start rambling, so I'll stop. But I think as a family, whether you're homeschooling or not, it is fun to do those types of lists, but it's also like in a practical sense, writing it down. And that's the type of list I will go back to and refer to for someone else, almost like what you were saying, Erin, because when I write those lists of my wants and wishes, I'm much less likely to refer back to those. And I think that's actually contributed to why I've maybe stopped writing those lists for myself. So that's probably something for me to reflect on more, but definitely practical for, this upcoming season to strew something or to invite my kiddo to go do something that they mentioned, a month previous or something like that.
Yeah, I love that. I love the emphasis you place there on like helping them to know that you're taking it seriously. I think that's like really lovely. And I remember when so I've got 4 children, and I feel like when they were little, I had not all the time, but I had 2 children who were the kind of children who could never visit a museum. It's a funny story, but a museum gift shop without buying something. And then I had 2 other children who were very much like, I'm taking my money very seriously, and it will have to be something amazing for me to buy it in this museum gift shop. And funnily enough, their kind of financial habits as they've got older have not necessarily stayed the same. But anyway, I remember thinking, do we have every gift shop we go in, we have to buy something, even if there's nothing there that they really want, they just cannot leave without buying something. And I remember reading, somebody said, write it down for them, tell them that you're going to put it on the list, and I know that's a tip for people who are budgeting as well, as it kind of, if you want something, write it on your list, and then look in a few weeks, if you still want it, then maybe you can buy it. But that really changed our experience in gift shops. Being able to, can I put it on the list? Can we put it on the list? And sometimes we did go back and buy things, and sometimes we didn't. But it really helped I guess to feel validated that this is okay to want this thing. It didn't always. Sometimes people still wanted to buy it then and there. It didn't make our life completely hassle free, but it definitely helped. And I think it was to do with that being taken seriously.
I wonder sometimes too, like how each of us as parents, because of course we have different personalities in the family. So, the kids and our spouses and personality, but I don't know. I often find myself reading about these great ideas. I mean, you've each just shared one, and I don't know. I find when I try to do things like that, I'm wondering if this is more me or if it's more just the kind of culture of our family, or if it's me kind of influencing the culture of the family. When I've tried to do some of those things, it never seems to quite fly. Like nobody ever flat out rejected it. But for some reason, like Haley, you know how much I've loved your joy list. Like I'll read those and I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. And I've sent both the Christmas one and the, I think there's just sort of a regular joy list post, and I've sent that to people and I've posted it places because I think it's so great. And I think it's a way of generating conversation and even just like self-reflection. What do we want out of this season? And yet I feel like for us, when I try to do things like that, they never really, like I can remember hearing about lots of different families who do sort of like goal setting at the beginning of each season. And I just feel like my kids kind of look at me like, well, I'm already doing, you already know what I'm doing. So I don't know, somehow it never seems to quite, like Sarah at Happiness Comes Here has pictures and these great things of like, I think it's a question wall. And so anytime somebody comes up with a question, you know, and I thought, oh, that's just so cool, because it's a way of, I mean, we all have those things that pop into our mind, and then it's like, it would be fun to record that and put that up. And I don't know, when I've tried to do things like that, it just comes off as not being quite a fit for our family. So I guess I'm pondering now how much of that is me and I'm just kind of not able to pull it off. Or is it just, yeah, like it's funny, even I remember last year saying to my daughter, you know, what do you kind of want, like, what are you thinking about fall, or what would you like it to look like? And just kind of like, well, what do you mean? I'm doing this. I'm like, never mind. It's just a cool homeschool idea I read about.
Yeah, but you see, if you've already got that organizational capacity, then you're kind of making work for work's sake, can't you? Really, you're already there. Whereas, yeah, I guess for us, because maybe our minds work a different way, or maybe, like you say, it's about us. It's about me in my home and you in your home, setting a tone, I guess, that everybody else is very much influenced by, I guess. Maybe it's genes. They're influenced by the fact that they, you know, who knows? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's fun. It's just funny to think about, though, isn't it? Just the different kind of ways that, yeah, us and our children and how that all kind of flows together. But yeah,
I can share, because I really, really loved when you first shared about the joy list, Haley, and the post that you had on that. That was just something that was like, I am definitely doing that. That sounds like a lot of fun. And my husband had no interest, but I think that came down to him being busy, just not in the right state of mind to sit down and do something like that. Like I clearly was. And my younger guy who likes lists was, you know, participated alongside me. My other guy, though, Aaron, was very much like, you know what I like. Why do we need to write it down? And just didn't see the point or the value. But he's not my list guy. He's not interested in lists for anything. And it's even, as I was listening to you share about that, Aaron, also doesn't want to really spend too much time. And I don't know why for sure. I don't want to assume too much. But when I'll say, like, what do you want to do this month? Or what do you want to do this week? Or what do you want to do this season? Whereas, you know, my younger guy will start brainstorming and think of things, and we can kind of write a list. My other guy, again, is kind of like, well, we'll just do it when we do it. Or let's just go do it now. Or same with like a project. You know, he'll be planning this project that he wants to do, and I kind of go to like, let me write down so I can remember and we can kind of get organized a bit. And he's just ready to jump in. Like, let's just do it. Like, kind of like, I don't need to talk about it in that way. Let's just more go ahead and do it. But the one thing I wanted to say about with the joy lists and those types of lists for us is, I wonder too, right now with my guys, they're still so young and we spend so much time together, right? Like we're together all day, every day for the most part. So I wonder if it'll change as they get older and they become a bit more independent and they start doing more things without me. So when I check in and say, what's bringing you joy right now? Like, what are you really enjoying spending your time doing? Or what do you hope to do this season? And how could I help with that or something? I wonder if then it will be, like easier for them to be like, oh, I want mom to know this, or I want mom to be aware of this, and they'll appreciate the question a little bit more. So I could see that those types of activities changing maybe over time, or maybe not. I mean, different personalities, like we've said.
Well, that's interesting because my children were older when we started Home Educating. So maybe because my eldest two were 11 and 9. So yeah, maybe. I don't know. And also they've had a long period of time at school, whereas, that's a different situation, isn't it? I don't know. It's interesting. Or it might just be that you guys have just got so much better memories than than we have. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. But I think one of the dangers of lists, definitely, and it is something that I know is a personality trait for me. There is a danger in too much planning, not enough action. And yeah, so for me, I could easily I'm a great planner, but that there's a saying, isn't there? But the execution, that's where I kind of fall down. So I think that is definitely something to bear in mind, that if you spend all your time making lists, then you're taking up a lot of time that you could actually be getting out doing those things. So your son is not wrong in the sense that, let's just do it. And if that works for you, then that is definitely the way to go, isn't it? And I guess that's what we come back to all the time, is the beauty of home education, is being able to more easily, I guess, go with those different tendencies of our children. And I think you mentioned earlier, actually, about the planning. And I think for me, that was an interesting thing to think about. How do we remember what we've done? Do we need to remember what we've done? Are there things, bearing in mind that we're thinking about, we're thinking about an unschooling lifestyle? Do we need to track things? Do we need to remember them? That's a question for us to ponder.
Yeah, well, and I think people's initial assumption is that there's not a lot of planning involved, right? And there's not a lot of whether that's lists or whether that's sort of big picture thinking or whatever, that it's kind of go with the flow. But I think even in that, like, kind of the course of natural life, well, the license would be an example. The driver's test that I mentioned would be an example of this. My daughter had a really busy beginning of the summer. She's got some stuff coming up. We've got a couple of us sharing a car for work. And in order to make that natural life event work, which is the driver's test, we had to structure a lot of time in to make sure that she had the amount of driving practice that A, she needed probably for the test, but that B, she was comfortable with, because she's not a person that would try a driver's test without being really, really sure that she had, that she was really comfortable with the skill and the knowledge. So looking at that and kind of I guess maybe planning backwards and saying, okay, this is the date of the license. What do we need to get here? I'm working these hours. My son, who needs the car, is working these hours. My daughter's working here these hours. So how do we fit this in, and how do we make it not just fit it in, but make it work? Make sure there are lots of good opportunities in doing different kinds of driving. And so even though that's a natural life opportunity that she just wanted to do, there's actually a lot of planning in that, and a lot of scheduling. So it's interesting how we can think, oh, it's just, let's just go with the flow, whatever comes up. But the things that come up often naturally involve some planning, which is how our kids build those skills that people can't imagine they would build. And I think, and maybe I'm a little bit off topic here, but if I look at the difference between working with a few of those obstacles and kind of working together to make that happen versus saying, well, driving class is this day each week, it actually requires more skill to kind of get into those more natural pieces and figure that out. So yeah, I don't know. That's just something that comes to mind, Haley, around that, because I think it is a misunderstanding, right, about what a self-directed life can look like. And I would say, like, she is such a list maker, and not just a list maker, a vision. She has visions, and she has goals, and she has objectives written down to meet the goals. And that's one way to be really self-directed. Not everybody directs themselves in that way, but I think we hear words like self-directed learning and we just think it's almost just sort of willy-nilly. It's kind of going off in whatever direction we feel like, but it can actually be quite disciplined. And for lots of people, it does involve lists and vision planning and calendars, right? Just all those tools, those planning tools, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's remembering that we're not living in an absolute all or nothing kind of way. That it's not the case that I'm doing all the planning for my children, or I'm doing none of the planning for my children. It's more that we're living in a kind of a partnership where I see my role very much as supporting them, not just to help them to think of all the possibilities and opportunities that there might be. So to bring them, I guess, ideas that they might not have thought about, but also to be somebody there for them so that if they do have something that they've talked about wanting to do, like you said about the driving license, that you can be somebody, that helps them to think about what the bigger picture is, I guess, and what all the steps might be. Some children will be more willing, responsive, whatever, they'll want to do more of those things than others, and that, and we know we obviously go through that process of seeing how our children want to manage that. But it's more, one of the most important things about my role, I guess, is being a little bit of a memory for them. I guess maybe that's one of the reasons that I make lists, is because I they tell me they really want to do something, and then I can be somebody who says, you did say you really wanted to do that. Hey, do you still fancy doing that? Do you want, shall we could do this towards it, or we could do that, or, and then they're free to say, oh yeah, that's great. Thanks. Yeah, I really want to do that. Or they can say, no, nah, not anymore. That's kind of, so I suppose it's that more about, facilitating and being supporting them to do whatever it is that their goals are.
Yeah, I think it looks a lot different than what I thought it would look like when we first started, as far as like planning. And because I can remember back to when we first started and I had lists. I think I had a lot of lists. What do we need when we're homeschooling? Because I mean, we've talked about it before, like you take on that responsibility of your children's education, and you kind of go, okay, we've got to get organized, got to get all the stuff. What do we need? Lists of materials. And I think I thought I'd spend a lot of my time writing down, like lesson plans, right? Like I'd be planning ahead and I'd make a list of all the things that I wanted my kids or thought my kids should learn, during that school year or whatever. And so I thought there would be a lot of that involved, and that's definitely not been our experience. I think because I learned early on through my kids that for me, this may not be true for other people, but for me, it was a waste of time, because I can make all the plans in the world, but they have their own ideas and they make their own plans, not by themselves. But they come up with their own ideas, and then we make the plans as we go. And I'm not the type of person to spend too much time, pulling from the curriculum and putting plans together, for my kids to say, we don't want to do that today. Like I'd be frustrated by that. Or even like people talk about it with strewing. What do you plan to strew? How do you, I'm trying to think how people have asked this before around strewing, because I think it's similar to working from a curriculum or a lesson plan, but like, do you have a schedule for strewing? And I'm like, oh goodness, no. I wouldn't bother. And again, that might work beautifully for some families, but it really would just be, if I enjoyed it, I could do it, but it wouldn't be for any other purpose because my guys just have their own ideas. So when I spend the time, like at the beginning, writing down a list of things we were going to do, that's not what we did. So I stopped doing that. And it was more so exactly what you were saying, Erin, like as things come up. So it's almost like I keep thinking of the term like a living document, right? So it's not to say that I never sit down or quickly jot something down or some ideas down or a list or a little bit of a plan even. But I keep it very brief because I know it can change and it's flexible. And sometimes we never go back to it and sometimes we do, but there always has to be like that flexibility because when you're following their lead and their interests, you can't, for me, we couldn't plan too far in advance. We're just kind of more like planning as we go, I guess. And then one other thing I wanted to quickly say about how I do the reverse planning where I often, not all the time, I often record down what we've done. And where we live, I don't need to report. So this would be different if we had to report, but I really just do it because I choose to. I've yet to really ever look back at what I've written down, which I find very interesting. It's like a comfort, I think, to know that I have that there, because I don't have a very good memory. So knowing that I can go back 6 months or, this time last year, I do it through my phone, through pictures as well, a little bit, but I know that I can, if for whatever reason I ever had to go back or just out of curiosity, I've and not in detail, but just like lists of what we did and jotted things down. But it's really out of comfort. But I do find it really interesting that lots of times when I do write that stuff out, so far anyway, and this might change maybe as they get older and we do different things, but I rarely look back. So I also find that quite interesting.
Yeah, I wonder, Erin, for you, I know with having older children, we've had, because I've kept over the years, I've kept things largely for our memories, and because it's just it's really interesting, isn't it, to look back and think about what were we doing, what was so and so interested in whenever. But as my children have got older and one of them's moved out, they've got more intentional about what they want to keep, I guess, and so I passed on to the older ones, but memory boxes, I guess, of things. But those memory boxes have been quite big sometimes because I've, not been able to get rid of paintings that they've made and stories that they've written. And of course, that they then have this and think, well, I don't know why you're keeping this for all those years. So you kind of, So you don't want to, you don't want to overburden them with loads of stuff that they've then got to sort out one day. But it's kind of, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, that's to do with my hoarding tendencies as well. Whereas, other people won't necessarily have those. But we've definitely, I mean, we've looked back on those more, Ashley, as they've got older, I guess. And part of that has been about them then chucking stuff out after they thought, right, okay. We don't need that anymore. But it's been fun to look at it. So
I'm curious if either of you, so whether it's a written list, Haley, or and I know you enjoy doing some too, Ashley, or whether it's, I guess I'm thinking of this differently now about my sort of, I can't remember what I called it, but it's almost like my physical stack is my form of a list. Do you, once you've written it down or once you've put things out, do you find that's out of sight, out of mind? Because I find for me, it's out of mind in the sense that I feel like, okay, well, I've made an attempt, right? Like I feel like I've done something. I'm not procrastinating. I have things set out by the door. But sometimes I will do a lot of checking of those things. So I'm curious if that's the same with a written list. But I also find it depends on what it is that I'm planning for. So this brings me back to the idea that I seem to have a lot more seriousness about something for somebody else than I do for myself. So again, for any of my kids' licenses, it's like, do we have the official documents? Have we checked the tires? Have we, like, I'm kind of going through this checklist of making sure that's all fine. And part of that is for them. Like I want it to go smoothly for them. And part of it is, I think, a little bit of the idea of doing something official. Like I'm in a government building and I need to have my stuff ready, like a little bit of that maybe. Whereas when we're, let's say, packing to go camping, which is a much bigger pack, like there's a lot more things, I'm very relaxed about it because I'm like, well, there's certain things you want to make sure that you have, but it's almost as though if something doesn't go right, there's no, I don't know, there's no official entity there who's going to, we just kind of have to pivot as far as the way we would do things. So I don't know, like, do you find yourselves going over the list, or does it depend what the nature of things are? What the nature of the list is for?
Yeah, I think it does depend. And I think I do have issues with, as I said earlier, about being a planner rather than a doer. So I could get lost in my list and keep trying to make that list perfect, I suppose. And I increasingly know that about myself. So I'm trying to work on that, to make sure that I don't get lost in procrastination, I guess. So but I am a checker. Yeah, I will check and check again type thing. Yeah. So
Yeah, I'm the same. Oh, sorry, Haley, go ahead.
no, I think I was just going to say, but it depends. Yeah, it depends.
Yeah, I'm definitely I think even more so now. I go back and check my any list often. Like I don't trust that I checked it thoroughly enough the first 5 times. And same as what you guys have said, it definitely depends on what it's for. And if it's anything, more serious, or I'm like, if you're thinking like a doctor's appointment, something official, more pressure to make sure we've got everything we need. However, I will say that the longer I've been a parent, which I don't know if this would be the case for a lot of other parents, but I think I was a little bit like when my guys were younger, I think I was a little bit more easygoing with, if we're just going somewhere. I can't use camping as an example because we don't camp, but wherever, just out for the day or something, I'll just throw everything in the bag, and if we forgot something, we'll make do, we'll solve the problem wherever we are. However, I will say that I sometimes just getting out of the house and being somewhere, especially if it's for like the whole day or something, or for maybe going to like, going away for one night, that in itself for us is not always easy. And so mine are 10 and 7, so not real little, but still young. And like I still, help them get all their stuff together. And I think because sometimes there's just already challenges as a family going away or being away for the day. I'm thinking like sensory things, and just maybe someone's woke, like maybe they're tired. Like there's just sometimes it's just not easy. So I have more pressure to at least try not to forget anything. And I can't off the top of my head, like their water bottles or something that would just be like another, small challenge, not a big challenge, but almost like I try to avoid forgetting anything to avoid, other little problems that, we probably could just solve wherever we are, but will we still have the energy to try to solve that problem? Does that make sense? I thought it would probably be the other way the longer I was at this, but it's almost like I've learned like natural consequences to forgetting to bring certain things for any of us.
Yeah, I mean, I have checklists for all different, for different clubs and activities that we go to. I have a checklist on my phone, and that is really helpful. Really helpful as long as I remember to look at it.
Yep.
So that's and that sometimes you need another list to remind you of the list that you've got that you ought to be checking. Yeah, then you could go on and on, couldn't it?
Oh, and I think it's such a good point, Ashley. And I think even though I don't necessarily make a lot of lists for things or really much of anything, but I I don't know, I would say like I do a lot of, I guess I could call it planning for personalities, right? Because you're going somewhere and there's different variables, and yeah, so you're kind of planning for yourself and what's going to work for you, but then you're also planning for those pieces, whether it's sensory stuff, whether it's people who need to stop to go to the bathroom a lot, people who don't understand why people need to stop to go to the bathroom. Like, there's all the pieces, right? So you're planning for those personalities. And then I think I've been realizing this summer, that I'm also planning for my self-care around planning for the personalities, right? So there really are a lot of moving parts to it. And it's why I think sometimes, like, I appreciate this opportunity to kind of talk about the different ways that we make sense of our life, because I think that there's maybe a bit of a bias toward, like physical lists and checklists and calendars, and that indicates, a certain level of organization or responsibility. But I think there are so many like very nuanced ways that we do that, ahead of time, on the spot, afterward, reflecting back to what we could maybe do a little bit differently. That we really, I think as parents, we are kind of in a continuous circle of organizing and planning, and whether we think about it like that or not initially. Yeah,
and I totally agree with you, Erin. And just on one of the specific points that you made, not everyone in our family, but at least some of us have coping lists, have lists of things that I guess if we're not feeling so great, things that we can turn to that are going to help us feel better. It may be lists of things that give us more energy, kind of reminders, of strategies that we can use if we're not feeling like, I don't know, the best versions of ourselves, maybe, or we're feeling really down or something. In fact, I wrote a blog post called Self-Soothing Checklist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, because that's been a list that I found really helpful for myself, because again, coming back to my memory here, aren't we? When I maybe am know that I'm in a state of maybe feeling a bit anxious or feeling a bit, or in a procrastinating state or whatever, it really helps me to have those actual lists of techniques and strategies, whatever, that I can use to help me to move forward, or just to change the energy that's kind of, to change my energy. So we have lists for that as well. So many lists.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's like a couple different things that just kind of popped into my mind. So I guess before I forget, one of them was around the age of kids and how that maybe changes as far as keeping lists, or I often think of like calendar, right? And I remember, I don't remember exactly how old my kids were. I don't even think my youngest was probably born, so they were pretty little. And I remember being at a meeting, and of course I was in the throes of like toddlerhood, infancy stuff, and it just felt, wonderful, but also exhausting. And I think those younger years, sometimes you can get through with the idea that it's going to be easier, it's going to settle down. And we were talking about calendars, and I think I must have just mentioned how we have key things on the calendar, but I don't put a lot on the kind of the wall calendar. And somebody made a comment, oh, well, no, I didn't when my kids were that age either, but now that my kids are older, we have so much more to think about. And I felt like confused and annoyed at the same time. Annoyed because I'm thinking, your kids are 10 and 12. Like this has to be so much easier, right? But it is true that as kids get older, their lives are not so much our lives, right? Like they don't just come everywhere we go, or they start to have their own interests and their own schedules. And so I do think that as my kids got older, I started to tap into the calendar more. And again, Haley, you're talking about lists for some of the activities, and I was thinking, so I don't really do that, but I think my version of that is having a basket where, if there's somewhere and there's like a form that needs, like, it's like a place that I put stuff. So again, I think it's physical rather than writing it out. But when your kids are little, you don't have much of that to do. There's not, even though it feels overwhelming in other ways, there aren't those same sorts of pieces that you need to remember. And the other thing that's kind of been coming up for me is this idea of, for some personalities, is list making possibly a recipe for disappointment, depending on how you manage things. And I can think about that from a to-do list perspective. Like even in my paid work, I can make a list of, okay, I'm going to make these calls, I'm going to get these done. And, 2/3 of the people aren't available. So I don't actually get that done because they have to call back. But then, Ashley, you'd made the point with our kids too, sort of holding those, so I guess this is an interesting question. How do we remain forward thinking and plan for our kids, but also let go of the outcome? And I think we probably all have various ways of doing that. But I wonder about that for some people, is making the list, depending on how you look at it, does it then feel disappointing or pointless, maybe pointless when those things don't pan out. And I think that's also the difference then between, is the list making to kind of move those thoughts out, or are you holding tightly to the outcome of the list? Because I think within unschooling, that can be, that's hard if you're holding to the outcome.
Yeah, that's when I don't pull those lists back out.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah, or don't make them in the first place with some things. Absolutely, because I felt like, yeah, and then if it gets done anyway, then great. But yeah, I just often won't pull them back out, I don't think. And then that works too.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas I think I'm the opposite. I think once I've made the list, that's kind of like, well, I've made that list, so that's great, but I don't feel so fiercely attached to them. Maybe I do. I mean, I definitely feel that sense of disappointment sometimes when I don't get my to-do list done. But that's just my list of personal to-dos that I've got to do. But when I'm thinking about lists that I kind of make for, I guess, for home education, or lists that I make with my children, I definitely see those much more as just a list of possibilities, and I think that helps me to detach, like you say, from holding on too tightly to thinking that we must get these things done. I don't know. I guess it's almost, for me, it's a unplugging. I don't know. It opens up my creativity, but I don't feel bound to do them. I don't know. That makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. And then when you're saying that, Haley, it almost makes me think that a list could almost be seen as brainstorming.
Yeah.
Right? So you're moving things out, excuse me, but you're also like generating ideas at the same time. But that's all but if you just leave them there as ideas, you don't give them the power to kind of, lead you in the direction of having to have a set outcome with them. It's a way of creating and coming up with some possibilities.
Yeah, and I think that's something to be very mindful of, because I know definitely, like I'm talking about my to-do list being a burden, I guess, sometimes. I know that for different members of my family, that also can be, that can be something for them, that they feel like that, they've got these lists that they've got to do. And I guess that's been part of my trying to be very intentional about saying these are not things we have to do. These are just things that we could do. And as they've got older, obviously there are some things that they decide, well, I'm not making a list on that because that makes me feel not so good. So don't make that list. I'm all for that, definitely. Whereas for me, if I've got it all in my head, I'm feeling much more attached to it. I can release my attachment to Yeah, it's okay. You don't have to learn Latin. I've written it on a list. It's an aspiration, but now you don't have to do it. Whereas maybe, before I wrote it on the list, I was just really, really attached to that idea. I don't.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me think too, again, I guess we touched on this a little bit, but like our threshold for, maybe it's how we spend our time and how we want to spend our time. So for example, for my husband, he would like to be very, have things like, I guess, as far as organizing things, let's just, as an example, for him, having everything in a particular place, he wants to put that time in ahead of time. He knows where that is. I am that person that if I put things away in a really organized way, I'm not likely to find it again. It's much easier for me to have a few baskets that I just kind of like drop things into. And often when I try to be really exact, I'm not able to find what I'm looking for. It's just not the way my mind works. So I think that maybe the way we organize things with lists and that sort of thing is maybe the same. It's like, where do you put your time and your effort? Because even around things, my husband would have things quite itemized, and it's very helpful. Like it is very helpful. But yeah, it's just interesting how we all think differently. we all, and it brings me to that thought about this idea about unschooling being a very sort of disorganized or unstructured endeavor, and the idea that we do, we read and we hear, and I've certainly lived it, that often kids will create their own structure. They will, and we can support them in that. But that is I find that to be so innate in kids, whether they want to structure their time, make lists, set goals, or whether they don't. And so I can imagine that if maybe you only had one child and you were unschooling and that child wasn't keeping track of things or putting things on a calendar or making a list, that you would think, oh, like self-directed learning does not work. They can't direct themselves or whatever. Whereas they might have a whole other system in place, or it might not be that important to them. And there are all kinds of people in traditional schools and who are also very disorganized, right? So it's funny how I think the tendency can be for us to attach, to attach that or kind of blame that on unschooling or a self-directed way of doing things. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the fact that we weren't wholly sure about doing an episode on lists, and yet we've managed to talk for so long.
Yeah.
So I guess, I just want to ask you if either of you got anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to share.
Well, I was thinking, excuse me, one thing that I think we have, I hope I'm not forgetting, and I hope I'm not going to repeat any of us, but it's just making me realize something right now about list making that I know I've touched on it, and we've touched on it a little bit, but this idea of, from my experience anyway, this list making as a way, whether it's the joy list, because that was my intention. This was my intention behind doing the joy list together as a family. I've done a list. I'm thinking back to Haley when you shared about, what was it? Like the self-care list that you refer back to. And it really has me thinking about how I've done, that is another purpose I've done lists before, is to share information with others. So like, when I was learning more about and focusing on my both my kids' sensory needs, and then starting to think about my own sensory needs, I started to write it down for myself to organize it, but definitely also for the purpose to share with others, like to share with my husband. Okay, this is what I've noticed about this kid and sensory needs. So if I'm not around, here's some ideas. And same with the idea behind the joy list. So again, I hope I'm not repeating myself, but because I thought there was value in us really knowing what each of us found joyful. So for the purpose of kind of having like a visual or like a written record for to share with other people within the family. And then the last thing that I was thinking about was, I still do it a bit, but more so when my guys were even younger, when grandma would come watch them, I would leave lists. I don't know how she felt about it, but for the purpose of being helpful, here's all the snacks we have in the house that they would probably like. Here's the different meal options. I don't know what else I would have written down, but I remember once I started writing the list for her, I could do a few pages. So, but for the purpose of being helpful and sharing with others. So, which before I really spent time thinking about this topic, I don't think I didn't really factor that in. And I've definitely spent quite a bit of time doing those types of lists.
Yeah, I'm sure that would have been really, or is really helpful, because it just gives, you're just giving such valuable information, aren't you, that's going to help to probably make things run more smoothly, and to help people, with the task in hand or whatever. I think there was one thing I wanted to mention, just to throw this idea out there of not to-do lists. The idea of things maybe that you don't want to do, I think, can be also an interesting thing to do. And we do, one of my daughters shared this idea with me a couple of years ago. What do I want more of this year? But then also there was what do I want less of this year? So kind of things that things that you're trying to stop doing. And I'm trying to think of something. And I can't think of something, but I'm sure that you can. I'm sure, So it's been lovely talking to you and sharing all the lists that we do make and that we don't make, and all the other ways that you can organise. Yeah, that you can organise yourself, your information, your tasks in other ways. I think that's been fascinating. Mm-hmm. So we will speak again soon. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll say bye for now.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Erin can be found on the web and on Instagram at Everlearning. Ashley can be found on Instagram at Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. And I, Hayley, can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. We'd love it if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might like it. And if you've enjoyed this episode, maybe you'd consider leaving us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We're so grateful you made time in your day to listen to us chat. Thanks so much for listening.